as you know, the World Cup is going on, and this is one of those things that I watched this video. It's of Morgan Freeman as he does the opening ceremonies to the World Cup, and I had a couple of thoughts off the bat about the performance, and I do encourage you guys to go watch it after the show.
I so wish that we could show it to you here because it was insane to watch. It made me feel like very creeped out and unsettled. Brett didn't get the same impression, but
once
it just felt like
yes.
globalist doom, like impending doom. Like it gave me existential dread to the max.
The first thing I wrote down was the hypocrisy of globalization, meaning that what we're talking about here. So I'm going to read like a quotes of what he says here. So Morgan Freeman, remember, he's strolling along, badly lip syncing this thing. I don't know if that's his fault or if
it was really bad.
But he says, "So we gather here as one big tribe, and Earth is the tent we live in." Intoned in a lip syncing and solemn Freeman on the field at Al Bayt Stadium in the opening minutes of the extravagant opening ceremony. And he goes on to this huge spiel, him and this co-host who's also, it was a double amputee.
Yeah,
right?
His co-host was some influencer or YouTuber from Qatar.
And what it is they give this very big, soaring rhetoric about how we can overcome our differences, and although we may live a world away, we may be worlds apart as far as our distance, are we really all that different, right? Now, this is obviously hilariously hypocritical, given that we are in an age now where, first of all, there's questions about whether they like bribed to get the rights to even host this World Cup, but they have shined a light on the LGBTQ issues in that community. Mary, me, different takes on LGBTQ.
Well, okay, but they're what some people, including Dua Lipa, have called out is human rights violations in regard to migrant workers in the country, in regard to how they treat LGBT people and women.
Yeah.
And there are valid concerns all across the board on those issues.
Did you see the USA?
All that I think is like when you compare where the US is at with those issues and when you compare it to how Qatar treats those people, there is somewhere in the middle that I would think is ideal. Okay?
Yeah.
So like, I'm not saying that there aren't human rights violations that they should call out and be worried about in this country. And I do think it's relevant to point out when they host the World Cup there, and really what they're trying to do is constantly shift the focus to something else. They're shifting the focus to, you know, how inclusive they're being on the public stage, but they're trying to distract from all of the exploitation of workers it took for that country to be built to where it is today.
Yes.
So I still think that it's valid for people to point out
Here's
and
my
boycott if they want.
Yes,
to.
And this is what I'm talking about. These types of messages, if you guys remember, you're too young to remember the original one, so am I, but We Are the World. About think of
with like Michael Jackson.
Yes, think We Are the World. They did a similar one in 2010 because of Haiti.
They did, yeah.
And then we have the Olympics with their soaring rhetoric at their opening games. This is where the internet has benefited us. These types of weird globalist messaging, which are extremely hypocritical and honestly, for the most part, you cannot bring this many cultures together and expect one soaring message to actually be authentic. And this is where the internet has allowed us to come together and point out these hypocrisies. But it also speaks to the divide in our culture where back in the day, everyone would have unified around this message, but the message would have been a lie.
Yeah, so I saw a lot of pushback to this, but then most of the response to what you're saying, Brett, has been, well, the West is just as bad, which is insane to say. Like, here's one tweet that I believe was like echoing what you're saying. They said his message, or Morgan Freeman's message, is, I will take a huge fee for shilling for this shameful organization while I privately complain to my friends about how their workers are treated. So yeah, it's hypocritical on that front, but some people are saying, actually, it's hypocritical for Western people to call this out because in the West, human rights violations of the same caliber are perpetrated all the time and excused all the time of the same scale. What they're saying is that, like,
not wanting drag queens in schools is the same thing.
Here's something Piers Morgan said, which I found idiotic to, like, a shocking extent. He said that the U.S. has draconian laws against abortion, which is equal, apparently, to the fact that many Middle Eastern and African countries literally execute gay people.
How good are they? How good are they at branding that not killing babies is draconian?
I mean, how you feel about abortion aside,
Yes.
if you think that like the fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned in the US is a human rights violation on the same level as like what Qatar has been called out for,
Yeah.
you are brainwashed.
Also, it's further proof of the West's inability to actually take action, because they could have just not gone, but instead they'll put a flag on their jersey and say we did our part, because they don't actually want to put their money where their mouth is. The same with I saw that a bunch of the European teams had like armbands, and then they're not wearing them because of threat of arrest. So this is what I'm talking about. You put on this massive ceremony, and I like the part with the amputee was quite stirring. But that's my other point here.
It was creepy.
The other point here is like this speaks to the absolute power of what a good performer can get people to feel, whether it's real or not, and that should terrify everyone.
For everyone calling this ceremony beautiful and moving and magical.
I feel like that era's gone now. I feel like that's
see it. I'm not buying it.
I feel like that is an AstroTurf take where like 25 years ago, I would believe that. I would believe that was the general sentiment. I think that the internet, the democratization of our information being passed from one to one another, I think that prevents this type of thing from having the impact it would have had when I was a child.
I mean, I wouldn't have known from personal experience, but I believe you that. I mean, you might have assumed things were more authentic back then.
How? Okay.
Let me read some tweets that were expressing this, though, about like the hypocrisy of us as Westerners. Someone said, "Funny how the whole Western world is built on robbing, killing people in the world and destroying civilizations, claiming this." Another person said, the best part about Qatar hosting the FIFA World Cup is how the Western world is having a complete meltdown, realizing there exists a world and culture outside of their bubbles, and exposing their hypocrisy with the sudden concern about human rights violations in the country. Another person said, have the same energy when the World Cup is held in the USA. That's going to be in 2026. It's going to be hosted by Canada, the US, and Mexico, by the way. Bring up their war crimes, what they did in Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, Iraq, the millions they killed in the Middle East. How do these people criticize Qatar? The hypocrisy is crazy. But like, we can talk about that. Yeah. Like, sure. No one is saying you can't talk about the possible hypocrisies of Westerners.
I would absolutely ask anyone to still do that.
All they're doing is calling it out in Qatar, and then the fact that they did this fake display hiring Morgan Freeman to go on stage and talk about how we can all come past our differences and everyone's living in one big kumbaya circle around the globe. Like, when you say that, then you deserve to be called out even more.
The internet is here, ladies and gentlemen. The days of kumbaya are long gone.
I want to... Also, people were trashing BBC, by the way, because they replaced this ceremony from being televised with a monologue from Gary Lineker talking about these concerns of human rights in Qatar. They did not televise Morgan Freeman's monologue at all on the BBC. And I think that's also just like idiotic, senseless self-hatred of people in the West, in all like European countries. The same thing comes from FIFA's president, Gianni Infantino. He delivered this insane speech that was like an hour long on the eve of the World Cup. Yeah. And here are some things that he said that were honestly embarrassing. He said, we are taught many lessons from Europeans from the Western world. What we Europeans have been doing for the last 3,000 years, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons. He continued, today I feel Qatari. I feel Arab. I feel African. I feel gay. I feel disabled. I feel a migrant worker.
Well, you should consult your mental health professional.
Yeah.
Because you
Like,
got issues.
How do you say this and take yourself seriously?
It's all so skin deep and so fake.
Truly.
Like there's
That's
nothing
how I felt
real anymore.
like watching the co-host who was a double amputee. It's like no problem with him being an influencer, being a performer, whatever. All of he's like a business owner. He is outspoken about, you know, disabilities and that's fine, whatever. But it's really just the pretense of having him on that stage that it makes me feel uneasy, because it's like all the appearances of having compassion for people who are at a disadvantage, and then when you look at the reality, when you look at it on an individual case by case basis, it's not actually related to how these people are treated in real life, especially, I'm sure, not in Qatar.
We just need
he
to
goes
end-
to Europe. This influencer said he goes to Europe every year to get surgeries that intervene in his condition so it doesn't kill him.
Yeah.
He doesn't go to a Qatari doctor to do that for him. Like, I'm just saying, like, the reality of it speaks volumes compared to the pomp and circumstance of this ceremony that's so self-aggrandizing.
The size in it did maybe it's just a case of like it coming to feel that way because you pointed out, but it does feel like weirdly demonic after you watch it, and it's just the tone they were going for. Does this just mean we're at the end of like there cannot be any more of these like look at us, we're all one, kumbaya family? It's just not realistic, and it's not the way the world works. And it's time to accept that, yes, every country has their own skeletons in their closet, but the point is that you don't throw stones in a glass house because everyone is guilty of something like this, at least from the perspective of someone else. You're not in a world anymore where you say something like that and you're just surrounded by people that know you or part of your culture. So they're like, yeah, you're right. You're going to be getting pushback from people who don't agree with you, who don't live where you live, who see the world differently than you do, which makes these types of things pointless, creepy, and overall ineffective.
It's a glass world, and we're a glass species in that regard.
Yeah, basically.
And I agree with the general consensus of the chat is that you should boycott the World Cup because soccer is lame.
So
right, you watch this ceremony and you're like, excuse me, what does this have to do with soccer again?
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
This is just a vehicle for their social engineering.
It's like they take things that people like soccer or football, depending on...
Or Morgan Freeman's voice.
Freeman, and they just
Brett,
use
don't
it.
you dare.
Call it football.
Yeah, I mean...
Football.
Ben Affleck as Batman is one thing. Football is a whole nother thing.
I didn't play soccer growing up, so I have no real attachment to it at all. I played baseball and
That should be a hiring question here. Did you play soccer or not? No? Welcome.
Ellen Thompson says, but shaming and criticism causes change. Agreed? Disagree?
It depends on if you're talking about an individual or a brand or a government. I don't think that the government of Qatar is going to change any of their policies and how they treat women or LGBT people or migrant workers based on, you know, Dua Lipa not performing there.
And here's the thing. I don't it's not my job to change their culture, right? It's their job to change their culture.
Yeah, but it's about your freedom of conscience. And if
yes.
you don't want to associate, then you don't have to.
Exactly. So when I say it's like, host your World Cup, do what you want to do, have Morgan Freeman there, but maybe don't preach
to us about how this is actually a win for wokeness.
Yes, like that's like don't preach to me when you clearly have not made any changes. It's so frontal and fake and surface level, and everyone sees through that now.
They don't, though. Most people fell for it. If you look at the social media response to Morgan Freeman, they fell for it. 1,000%.
Oh, on the YouTube channel, I was shocked by how many people are like, he's the voice of it. And I love Morgan Freeman as an actor. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like the people who put this into effect, right? They're like, yes, the world is coming together. I'm like,
sounds weirdly maniacal when they say it like that.
It's just that voice, man. He could say anything. He could be like, it's time for grilled cheese on mouse. And
sounds
like
really
everyone
good.
would do it.
But then I would agree with him.
Yes. I know.
If he said that.
Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.
Bye.